All the spears cut through all the water.
And Saturdays as well,
And
from what I'm
Saturdays.
here. All right, folks, welcome. If you are tuning in, this is going to be a live discussion on The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. And if you're just joining us, I brought a bunch of people that were inspired to read this book by one particular booktuber who we do have on here. That is Evie. Evie provided this book for me. Let me show you that gorgeous
Matt,
cover.
and I was gonna just rage quit. So
yeah, I don't. That
Yeah,
if I had,
I'm the spear prophet, am I not?
If I had a plan to get you off of the show, I definitely would have said Matt. That would have been you would have been gone.
Provided me with this copy. Evie is
Jared, you're not holding up a copy, so it sounds like
I don't have a physical copy because nobody sent me one. I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say
that's great. I like that. Good job.
No, I read it on Kindle, so I
All right, and so we're going to get into a live discussion. If you're watching this now or on the replay, you are now a thread in the weave, the Indune weave that is the best book I've read in 2023, and that is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. If you haven't seen, I've been raving about this book, and so have other people in the community. I started for me, would have been a reread. I started a read along to try to get a bunch of other people to read this book in the community, and the outreach was amazing. I have a few people that reread it with me during this reread in my Discord, and we had an amazing time. We broke it down by chapter. If you don't know, these chapters are very long. And they are cut down by days. It's a 5-day extravaganza, this book. And, Simon Jimenez just did an exceptional job with execution and beautiful writing. And I couldn't wait to reread this book. And I brought some people along with me, and we got some new people to read these books. And here's the live discussion. We're going to, discuss. Right now, we're not going to get into any spoilers, but we'll just discuss, our first impressions and what we think of this book. Why don't we just start with Alicia? Go ahead.
I've heard rave reviews from everybody you brought up, and I'm trying to get more into sci-fi because I'm more like fantasy, and I read a little bit of everything, but the least amount of books that I've read is sci-fi, so I figured I'd pick it up since you raved about it so much. And I loved it. I have a lot of questions, and I immediately wanted to reread it because I think about half of it probably went over my head. So to me, if I immediately want to reread a book, it's a 5-star.
It's an excellent point. That is. How about Jared? I know this is a first read for you as well.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, you said you announced a read along, and I was like, okay, it's on your best book of the year. It was Matt's best book of the year, and of course, Evie continually promotes it, always and forever. And so
it's the best book of Evie's life, I think.
I couldn't help but get in on this read along, and I had to. I had definitely. Oh, look at that! I had to definitely squeeze it in to my schedule and do it, and I was very happy I did it because I love the experimentation with the points of views, and that was because I like experimentation in writing, so that was just like so, awesome stuff.
By the way,
right.
I'm just gonna put it out here, even though I will shove this book in people's faces literally if I could. If you got problems with it, don't be afraid to, be critical. I'm as much as I'm, I have my identity tied to this book. I can take it. I can take it.
There'll be no hit squad.
My only problem with the book was how aggressive Evie is about it. The book is actually pretty good, but Evie scares me.
I mean, I'm terrifying, I suppose. Anissa, oh my god, I'm gonna kill you. Sorry. That
Oh,
was
jeez.
aggressive. That was really aggressive.
See what I mean?
Yeah. She has proven the point.
I
We
was,
do have
I
a
was,
few people here in the chat that enjoyed it. Sarah J, one of her favorite, or one of their favorites of all time. At least favorite for me. It's standalone. This was just, I thought it. In my opinion, yes, it's a perfect book, but I do see issues with it. You know, the POV shifts can be a little much, for sure. Can get confusing at times, and it is very layered, you know, and I just thought that the structure was very unique, and it I kept diving deep. It felt like I kept diving deeper and deeper and deeper into the book because of all the layered stories here, and you just were surrounded. It was very magical. There's just so many different things I can say about this one. Um, we have another person that loved the book, obviously, because it's one of the best ones, right? And a couple people here in the chat. Hey Taylor,
They do.
this book awesome. Hey Chadia. All right, Anitha. All right, Big O. Hey, how's it
Anita has
going?
no excuse, by the way.
Anita
Hi,
somehow
Has she
expects
not
that
read
she
the
would.
book yet?
She has not
No,
read the book yet.
and we're supposed
Oh,
to be
is
like
she
best
even
book
your
readers.
friend? Like, yeah, Oh, Anitha, what do you do? You should have read the first chapter and come on and let us know what you thought here.
Oh, the peer
All
pressure.
right.
The peer pressure.
Yeah. So yeah, I like what Chadia stated here. The experimentation with POV shifting, I think that people can get caught off guard by, and you know, when you're first reading, at least that whole first chapter, you believe the story is about you. And then, you know, that's the perspective you believe that you have. And then it begins to shift into more of a second person and third person telling. And when you first read it, what were your initial thoughts? How about Evie? Why can you remember your initial thoughts when you first just picked it up and dove into this book?
Yeah, I remember being. I mean, I was fully engrossed, like from the moment of this one's for me, from the dedication, and then getting the you perspective in the before. I was just, all right, this is an invitation to just be a part of this narrative with the you perspective, and I was just absolutely engrossed and compelled by the narrative structure and the really the invitation and the introduction to the story. And I couldn't put it down, obviously. The twist of the narrative perspectives with the second person, the first person, and the third person, took a little bit of time for me to adjust, but I think for me the visual cues and the kind of the more poetic aspect of it without it being too purpley prose was something that I really appreciated, and so I realized I needed to really take my time with this book. Not that it was overly complex or anything like that, or dense or difficult to read. It's just something that I wanted to on that initial read and continually do on reread is a book that I wanted to relish, and the prose really really demands that of you, I think.
Very well. Alicia, do you recall like what you thought when you first picked it up? Like your initial thoughts when you got to that first chapter?
I really love the structure of it, and I'm a theater nerd, so I kind of love the structure of how it was set up like a play, and that you were
Yes,
kind of
excellent
the
point.
little interludes where you were thrown into like, well, you're on the stage and this and that, and that
Hmm.
that my theater nerd kid brain just went insane. Um, I do have like one critique of it, and I spoke
Yeah.
about it with Evie offline. And the only critique I have is the use of a certain term against people with disabilities, because I have a disability as well. So, if you don't mind me saying, using the word cripple to describe somebody bugs me. And that's just the one little critique I have of the whole thing. I understand why it's there, but
Right.
it wasn't really necessary to explain the character, in my opinion.
I get exactly what you're saying. I think there was definitely an overuse in the word, that it definitely had a purpose. But yeah, I could see an overuse could definitely bother some people for sure.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly where and when. Was it used in the book like as a narration description of Kima, or was it used by other characters?
No, it was used by other characters that cripple over there, and that's what bothers me. Is if it's a narration thing, it doesn't bother me. But when it's used as a description, like
I would have expected it's the other way around.
Yeah, like I have a disability as well, so like it's one of the things that I just don't like that term.
Yeah.
I would have expected it to be more difficult to hear if it's in the narration, because that's the author using it.
Yeah.
To the reader, rather than an asshole character that the author has written to show that he's an asshole. He's using that word.
Yeah, it's all about intent. It's all about intent for me. Like, I don't mind it if you're saying that you have crippling anxiety because you're using it in different terminology. Sure. When you're using it to describe someone's physical appearance, and that's the only thing you're using to describe that person.
Right.
Yeah. Adjective versus noun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Colin,
welcome to the live, man. Good to see you.
You as well. Sorry I'm late. We initially had this at 2, and then my brain just completely forgot the whole aspect of us moving it to 1.
Not a problem. It was kind of snuck in there at the one point. It was initially at 2. I do recall that, so don't even sweat it. We're just kind of getting our bearings here. Colin, The Spear Cuts Through Water. This is your first book by Simon Jimenez and your first time reading this book. Is that correct?
Yes. And it will not be my only Simon Jimenez, and it will probably not be my only time reading this book.
Yeah, damn right. What were your first impressions?
Maybe it won't even be your only copy. I have a hardback and a paperback.
I thought this was so cool. Just the entire concept. Like the plot I thought was extremely intriguing. It had for me like this kind of like whimsical fantasy feel, where it was just like a really just totally out of the box idea that kind of felt to me like it was going to be this like fun, there would be conflict, and then like I was just like blown away by how randomly and abruptly vicious the things would get in this story.
It's totally whimsical up
like
to
there'd
a
be
point.
This whole passage of absolutely beautiful prose. I'm like sucked into the story, and then like somebody will lose their head, and I'll be like, oh, okay, that's where we're at. So overall, I loved it. I want to try to structure a review, but I don't even know how I'm going to do that, because this is one of those books that's kind of hard to talk about a lot without spoilers, I feel.
I will just say, to get it out of my system, well, one of the things out of my system, just wait for the rest of it, but the flower was cut, its red petals strewn. Absolutely gorgeous. Way to describe someone being beheaded.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of that kind of poetic language, which is totally descriptive, totally clear what it's talking about. Like, it's not super abstract or something. It's just extremely evocative and poetic and paints a picture. What a book.
Yeah.
So your first impressions, because you also have a review of this book on your channel, Matt. Can you remember? I'm not sure if I asked you if, regarding your first impressions, because I do remember you saying something within your review where you were just like, just read the first chapter. Or so there was something that you felt in the beginning of your experience in this book that made you, recommend for those to read it to, just get through this first chapter. Can you maybe elaborate on that, or maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of people are not necessarily like this, but I like reading books that are different. Yeah, that I like when I bump into a book and I'm like, whoa, I'm not sure what exactly it's doing, but I haven't seen this before, and that was definitely this book. The structure, I mean, I've seen second person before and I actually didn't like it much, like N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy. I read the first book, didn't want to continue. And that whole second person all the way through thing, I was just like, I'm a bit tired of this because it's obviously not me that they're talking to. But this one, first of all, I think I said it in my review. I wanted everybody to know the whole book is not second person, which I think is good. And there's a point where it shifts and it becomes much more a first person / third person story, and it took a while for me to get used to it. That's why I said in my review, like, if you're going to read it, promise yourself you'll read the first chapter, the whole first chapter, because that'll give you enough that if you, at the end of the first chapter, you're annoyed or disappointed or whatever, then, DNF it if you want. But just get through the first chapter and let yourself sink into the prose and sink into the very odd structure, which is nothing like any fantasy book I've ever read before. And that'll give you enough that you know what's going on, and it'll give you enough time that maybe you've gotten used to it, because it's not exactly like reading Shakespeare, but I like reading Shakespeare, but I haven't read Shakespeare in a long time. So whenever I go back to Shakespeare, I've always got an hour where I'm like, oh, that's right, he uses English a lot better than almost everyone and differently than almost everyone. And you have to get used to it,
Definitely. Good point.
And this book was exactly like that. After the first chapter, or even after the middle of the first chapter, I was like, okay, the hooks are sunk in. I am reading this all the time whenever I have time until I'm finished. I'm just going straight through this. The other thing that was really difficult for me was I was really nervous that Evie was going to have to kill me if I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Luckily, that didn't happen.
Not at all. I believe, I'm going to be honest, when, Evie was raving about this book, you look at it from the outside. And for me, I'm somebody that really enjoys adult fantasy, something very well based in reality, A Song of Ice and Fire, Dune, things that are very, I don't know, just very more adult, and I like the visceral. I like the gritty. And when you look at this cover, that is no way. This is not what that this might not be what I'm looking for. But then you start to read it, and it can get, I like darker fantasy, and this can get very dark, and it touches on, adult themes and things like that. And that is really what got me, when Evie started suggesting this book to everyone. I was like, I didn't really know Evie's taste. And she kept hitting people with stuff like, it's pretty dark, and I remember, I think she was trying to get me to read the book, and she's like, it is pretty dark. And I was like, all right, let me All right,
What's
if
your
the- if
gauge
she-
of darkness? Is what
Wait,
basically
right,
we
right. I've
did
read R.
today.
Scott Baker, so this is my darkness is very deep, and we won't
But at the
discuss
beginning
that
of
now.
the beginning of the book, it's like Evie had said, it was really dark. And at the beginning of the book, I'm like, "Are you on crack, Evie? This is not dark at all. It's almost a fairy tale. It's so
Fairy tale,
mythological.
yeah.
I love
It feels." And then people's heads started exploding and shit. And then I was like, "Oh, okay. She wasn't wrong.
No,
She wasn't wrong."
I will say that you say, oh, it's very, very fairy tale. Fairy tales are actually very, very dark.
That's true.
Okay?
That's true. The
Just
original,
so you
The
know.
originals, yeah.
the original
I think
old
I
school fairy
love
tales
that.
are
I think
pretty
I'm
damn dark,
looking. Yeah, I think I'm looking for that adult fairy tale these days, and that that really dark
Yeah.
fairy tale, and
Hansel and Gretel bake the witch.
yeah, and
Spoilers.
But to
Yeah.
be fair, the book does start off with your grandmother telling you a story, your Lola. So you think that's sweet at first, but then it goes into
no, but you
overdrive.
sense it.
Lola's pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
But you sense it right away that it's a bit different because Lola is asking a child to roll her a freaking cigarette. So all of a sudden, you're just like, oh,
You
this.
haven't had the right grandparents then, Dan.
I was just gonna say the same thing.
Yeah. No, I have. That's when I started reading that, I'm like, oh, grandma's a savage, dude. My Bubby was a savage. And I was just like, oh, dude, she's asking a child to roll a cigarette for her. And he's like, picking tobacco off of his lip.
But that always happened in the 40s. That always happened back in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, back in the 40s. But you can sense that it wasn't this was not a feel good just by that little description there. This is a little more not dark, but a little more adult, a little more realistic, maybe more urban, because me being a dad, I wouldn't ask my kid to roll me a cigarette. That's just that's taboo. So all of a sudden, you are getting this feel right from the beginning that it is a little different. It's not a feel-good
Lola's
type of
a
story.
cranky old lady, and she's got sharp edges.
Dude, I love Lola's one of my favorite characters in this
She's
book,
awesome, yeah.
bar none. Mm-hmm.
Dan, I just have to say, so it may be taboo for you to not ask your kids to roll your smokes. It's because you're not a grandparent yet. So
I think that's an excellent that's an excellent point because we talk about time and in this book a lot and changes over time and how we change over time. So that's definitely an excellent point. You're right. Maybe when I'm a grandfather, because maybe when I'm a grandfather, I'm like, I don't care no more. Roll my cigarette.
You do it when you're a grandfather. You do it just to piss your kids off.
Yeah. Yep. I want to fill my grandkids up with food when I finally have them, so they don't eat their parents' dinner, because I do that today. I cook for my kids and so they eat already, and I got this beautiful dinner that doesn't get eaten. So Jared, have we touched on your first impression when you first picked it up?
A little bit, yeah. But I loved it right away, so there was no hesitation for me whatsoever. Because, like I said, I love experimental writing like that, and I just that's the idea that it was this journey that was going to be so short, just 5 days, and you had the introduction, which just introduced us to these wonderful characters, and he's doing it through through that vehicle of the second person, and then switching back and forth from the first person and the third with the use of the brilliant use of the italics that allowed you to that give you that pre-warning saying, here, this is a first person thought, and his choices of using that first person thought for anyone in the book was riveting, because you got so many different viewpoints of what was going on in
random
the story
characters
itself.
who happen to be standing nearby somewhere, or
just tertiary
the ancestors of somebody, or just wild. Really
and
wild.
so that was great, and you can also just tell, you had that feel of a play, of a stage, like you were saying, and and uh, and you're in the audience, and you're there, and I love that sense of being there, being part of the story, and I just so drew me in so hard. And then even when some of the later parts of the book turned mainly to third person, especially like chapter 3 and 4 and stuff, you were still there. You were still part of the story. And I was just like I told Matt earlier today, I was looking for that spear in my wall over there every time I was reading this thing.
You need to get you need to get a spear.
I need to get a spear and put it up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I might not look. I might not look for a sword.
As a designer, I look at books like this probably differently because I've been designing shit for 25 years. Like the way that not only that the text is written, but also then how it is visually presented makes a lot of the things, a lot of what's going on in the book could be confusing if it wasn't done right. And it's done right. So I never got lost. And it's like there are constantly little bits like this where it's a sentence. So the paragraph stops and it feels like it's almost a chapter break or something, but it's not. It's just the next sentence, but it's being emphasized in that it's set a little bit larger. It's set in a different font. It's set with quite a lot of space around it. And it gives it this rhythm that a normal text in a normal novel does not have, no matter how you write it. And this is just such a beautiful use of typesetting as a narrative design, like part of the narrative. It's so well done. And then the bits that Jared was talking about, they don't really start until later, but there are, in the middle of normal text, you'll just have a little italic bit. And that italic bit is a first person by someone.
Yeah.
Could be a nearby witness, could be someone who's been dead for 100 years and their spirit is reacting to something or whatever. And it's always extremely relevant in the flow, but it's just inserted in the middle, but it's italic. So you know what it is. The first time you see it, maybe you're like, what is that? After a couple times, you're like, oh, okay, that's like the first person chorus inserted in the middle of things.
Literally page 6 is when the first time
okay. I was just flipping through and I didn't see it.
Okay. And that's right. On to touch on the mythological thing, the fairy tale feel.
Mm-hmm.
He actually transcends the whole mythological, gamut, if you will, because he goes from fairy tale to actual gods and gods being eaten and stuff like that, which is very, very mythological in its feel and in its flavor. And so he really does
flavor. Get it? Flavor. I see what you did there.
You like that? He really gives you the whole range.
Yeah, I got a finger over here too.
But the whole range of the mythological sphere, from simple fairy tale all the way up to Twilight of the Gods. It's really really wonderful how he does it.
All right, I just wanted to say what's up to some people here in the chat. I believe Anitha had to skate. Anitha, thank you for stopping by. Though you might want to address this later, Evie. You might want.
Anitha said she was leaving to avoid spoilers for a book that 2 comments previous she said she will never read. Just because of Evie.
I think she's going to read it. I believe she will read it. Let's.
She better. I sent it to her. So.
She has no excuse.
I want to say what's up to Britton. Thank you. I miss me too every day. I miss myself. Britton, thanks for stopping by in the comments. I think this is Yalk K or Yalk. This is a great comment. This chaos was beautiful within this first chapter. I liked what Alicia said about the theater because there is an inverted theater within this. There is a setting within this that is a theater, and when we get to this setting, these shifts. The prose is very theatrical when we get to that part, and it really just transports you into this area here, because everything is grand. Everything that the writer is saying is grand, and I just thought it was the atmosphere and the way Jimenez developed this atmosphere through these perspective changes, and the change in writing style within that second person, and I just thought it was magical, at least throughout that first chapter, because you were trying to get your bearings. And I first listened to this on audiobook. I was sitting at my desk. I remember listening to Matt do a review on this book, and I'm like, let me just listen to it really quick. And I was hooked from the beginning. But what Matt said about this style of writing, actually, he brought up the structure and these breaks. It was easier for me to pick up, because, like, if I was reading this book, I probably never would have it would have taken me a minute to understand what those italicized were. I'm sure I could have gotten it immediately, but when you were listening to it, you're hearing the narrator start to tell the story, and then change his voice into like a more feminine voice, or a doctor's voice, or something like that. So I understood these POV shifts were happening. So that what did
And
assist
that is
me.
the mark of a great audiobook narrator, by the way, because not every audiobook narrator would understand that or grasp that. And
I mean, if they can narrate this book well, then they're a good narrator. Like I would just as a designer, my heart bleeds a little bit when I hear someone audiobook this book, because they put such intent and care and talent into the typesetting, the visual layout of this book, and I really recommend reading it with your eyes, because
if you are able,
of course. I mean, I'm not going to tell Raph to read it with his eyes, obviously, but like, there is so much in the actual visual layout, visual design of this book that I think is worth experiencing with your eyes if you're able. But it's good to hear that, like, they translated that well into audio.
Yes, I thought
I tandem read it with the audio plus reading it physically.
Okay.
So that helps, because I've never read anything by this author, so I try to do a tandem read if I have to, if it's a different format for me.
When you say tandem, do you mean like immersion reading, like you're listening and reading at the same time?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Not switching back and forth. I've done that, and it usually ends up confusing me, actually.
Yeah, I can't do the switching back and forth. I've tried. I can't do it.
I have a thing. I can't listen to an audiobook if I'm sitting. Like, I have to be doing something. So usually my audioing would be like on the train to work or something.
Yeah,
so
I clean when I
in the morning. Yeah, I would sit in the morning, and I would read the book, and then I'd note where I was and go to that bit in the audiobook, and then leave to go to work and listen. And after a day, I was lost. So yeah, I think I need to stick to one medium or the other.
Yeah, I am actually starting not to do audiobook as much as I used to, and getting back to reading. And I just I find those 2 hours at night, an hour at night that I get to read, I'd rather just read. Especially if I have the quiet and I don't have anything to do. But all right, so we got past this. What's that?
Oh no, I was just gonna say. So before I'm assuming we're gonna go into spoilers, but before we do that, I just wanted to mention that we've talked about like the theatrics of it all with the inverted theater and everything, and the aspect that I think is I mean I definitely like really didn't focus on it until really probably the past couple of rereads, is the aspect of dance and rhythm throughout the story. And that also is theatrical in a way, because it's, especially with like what is it, Kabuki theater, I think it is like
Yep.
there's this very the kind of dance rhythm quality to the drama. And I think the use of dance and rhythm and the capital R rhythm throughout the story is just so well done and encapsulates so much of the story. And it's, pun intended, weaved throughout the narratives. So, end comment. There you go. Sorry. I just want to make sure.
May I add something before we switch? Because this was probably like my favorite part of experiencing this book. First of all, we all read a lot, or else we wouldn't have booktube channels. But sometimes books feel like an experience, and this, to me, felt like an experience. The only other book recently that I've read that gave me the same feeling, and in a very different way, would be Paranesi, just because it was so different. But what I'd like to say is probably one of my favorite aspects of this book, because we're still talking about the theater aspect, is it felt like actually being in a theater where, and what I mean by that is it's awkward at first. You don't know the characters yet. You don't really know where this is going yet. You don't know how this is all going to play out. And at first, I'm sitting there thinking about being in a theater and seeing actors and actresses act and being surrounded by an audience. And I'm very conscious of that. And slowly but surely, I get so enveloped in the story that I forget I'm in a theater and I'm completely focused on the story and I'm living the story. And then all of a sudden, Jimenez will bring something up to remind me that I'm in a theater. And it's like coming out of that trance, like an intermission at an actual theater show, or somebody dropping something next to you and reminding you that, oh, I'm not in this living it. I'm actually in a theater. And then I'm like, oh my God, I forgot this is a theater show. And then like 20 or 30 pages later, I'll be so enveloped in the story again and then just forget that I'm in a theater. And like he nailed those specific times where he would remind me that I was in a theater so perfectly. And it would like kind of be a breath of fresh air, like, oh, I'm coming out of it. Like
only
I can breathe. Like,
there's also another level. Like,
yes,
it's not a spoiler to say, like, for anyone who hasn't read it, who's in the chat, there's the you level, right? Second person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's taking place in a 30s, 40-ish, kind of like our world, but not exactly our world setting. And that person goes into this theater, which isn't in our world. I think it's in a dream, basically. And then there's the play that's taking place on the stage in the theater. And then in that play, people tell stories. So you're in that story. And once I got what was going on with the structure and like all of these narratives wrapped in narratives, I was like, oh, okay, you're doing something very risky, Mr. Jimenez, with your second book. Interesting. I hope you don't screw this up. And I kept waiting for him to let one of the plates he was juggling drop, and he didn't. Like, it just, all the plates spinning all the time simultaneously, and none of them drop, you know? And it moves back and forth, like Colin just said. Like, you'll be deep in the story and totally invested in it, and then you take a breath and you're in the theater again. It's like, oh, that's right, I'm in a theater. And then you take a breath and you're in the second person you world again, but only briefly, and then you're back in the theater and back in the story, you know. And it's just masterful how he does it. It's insane that this is his second book.
And then there's the literal intermission part. So
and there is an actual intermission in the theater,
dude. But that part, because Colin was bringing that up, and he's like, "Oh my God, I'm in a theater." Like that part, him explaining you. He gave you the his social anxiety as well during the intermission, because as Colin was stating, you're around people, and you can sense his uncomfortableness. When the show's on, he's fine. It's theatrical. He's enjoying it. The lights are off, and now he's you know, he's got to worry about himself and his problems. And he goes to this intermission, and he even he doesn't want to talk to anybody that's around him. He's doing these, you know, things that I do. I don't like going to the grocery store. I don't like the intermission of a theater. Somebody's going to freaking talk to me. I can't have that happen. You know what I mean? So it felt that way. And
Who
then
would
he
have-
went
who would
back
have
into
ever
this
thought-
grand story.
Who would have ever thought that we could all relate to a nerd who really likes stories and is uncomfortable interacting with people?
Yeah.
Who would
Mhm.
have thunk?
Crazy.
I see a
Think
few
about
of them.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, hey, Joanna, thanks for stopping by in the chat. Brian, thanks for also stopping by in the chat. Oh, my man
I will
right
be watching
here.
your updates, Brian.
Mm-hmm. We had Mr. One Old Geek here. He joined us for the read along, and he enjoyed the book as well. It's something just very different. So I guess we will go.
Hey Dan,
Mm-hmm.
real quick. I have to attend a birthday party for one
Okay.
of our friends,
Uh-huh.
but I did want to
Who?
hop on. This was, well, if I told you that, I'd have to. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm bummed that I couldn't stay the whole time. But I did definitely want to hop on and just say hi to all of my friends on here and talk about how awesome this book was for a little bit. So I hope you guys have a great chat.
This
Yo,
will
Colin,
not be
thank
the
you for
last
stopping
time any
by.
one of us talk about this book, Colin.
Invite me. I
unlike
want
it.
to talk more about it. Please invite me.
No, we're gonna. I'd like to do the Vanished Birds as well. Maybe we can get some people to read that as well. I'd like to reread the Vanished Birds.
I'm in.
That would be great. I know you got a split, Colin, man. I'm glad that you read this book. I'm glad that you came on. If you have guys watch this, if you haven't seen Colin's channel, go check it out. He does talk about the spear cuts through water and his thoughts. Hey, buddy, thanks for stopping by, man.
Good to see you, Colin.
See you,
Hi,
Colin.
Colin.
Bye.
See you guys.
All right,
Have a
bud.
great chat.
All right, let's. We treated like a theater was like a pantheon of gods setting, watching from above the story playing in real time. It was very theatrical and cinematic in some aspects. Hey, Epic, what's up? Bit late, no problem. Epic, I did put a link in my channel. You can go hop on this live if you do have some time and you want to talk about this book. I'd love to hear what you have to say. I tagged you in the link in my Discord. So we move on from this, and we basically. So we're just talking about this first chapter. I guess we should go into spoilers or writing or themes. What else do you guys have to say about this one?
Spoiler or still non-spoiler, just to make sure.
Why don't we go into spoilers? We've been at this about an hour. Why don't we go into spoilers? And if you haven't read this book, it's about time you drop off. But if you haven't read this book, I don't know what you're doing. Go get this book immediately. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Spoilers.
Go. So, okay.
So here goes Evie.
Let's go. Yeah. So it's well, I can't say it because not all of you guys have read The Vanished Birds, but I will just say that other than the you perspective, I expected the Emperor to play a larger role narratively in this book.
Yeah.
And that
The
he-
Emperor exploding almost immediately was like,
literally at the end of before.
what?
It's like
Yeah, it's
I
not
guess
even
he's
the
not
in
gonna
the
be
days.
around for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And he did that. He did that a few times. Like I forget the name of the woman who gives Kima the spear.
Araya.
Araya.
Yeah.
Also, like
Ooh-hee.
Yep.
Ooh-hee.
she was set up. I thought she's important. She's going to be like Kima's
And she is
companion on
important.
something, and boom, she's gone too.
Yeah, and
Immediately.
and not to say that they're not important, because they obviously are, and I think that's just the craftsmanship of Simon Jimenez, that he's able to take these characters, even the minute, italicized kind of chorus perspectives in the first person narratives. He's able to flesh these characters out so well that you connect with them in some way, at least like you are invested in them, whether you like them or not, and that they're there for just a moment or a scene or for a chapter, and they're not the primary protagonists or whatever. It's just really, really well done and well executed. Yeah, it's just so good.
It reminded me a lot. I mean, I have to bring up Malazan in every live stream I'm in. It reminded me a lot of Stephen Erickson, because there are bits where Stephen Erickson in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, he'll write a page or two about a character you've never heard of before, and after 2 pages you're invested. You're like, I want this guy to succeed. I want him to survive. I want to see what happens with him, and then he dies. Like, Steve is just screwing with you, but he'll introduce characters in dangerous situations, give you enough of their internal monologue that you care, and then they're gone, Yeah. And it reminded me a lot of that. It's like, okay, I want to know what's going on with Araya. Oh, okay. I guess I'm not going to know what's going on with Araya.
But even with the death of the Emperor and Uriah, they're still so central and key to the story. I mean, this whole thing is happening because the Emperor, imprisoned his wife, the Moon, and of course we get the spear from her. That's with the book's title, and so it's just so tied in together and so key.
Jared and I were talking about this earlier, and I was arguing a couple of weeks ago on the Discord with somebody about it. Is she actually the Moon?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. I'm glad Evie, the actual goddess of the spear cuts through water, agrees with me. What's that?
That was my interpretation when I read it.
Yeah.
It was actually the Moon.
Yeah, she is the actual Moon.
Yeah, so I do actually on the reread, and someone actually pointed it out. I think it was you, Matt. There seems to be a slight inconsistency where the moon is referenced.
Moon is shining on somebody's sword while he's polishing it, or something.
Well, there's not supposed to be.
There's no moonlight. There's a hole in the sky where the moon used to be.
Was that a simile? Was it?
No, it was a physical description.
Okay.
A physical description of a guy. Okay. I think he was polishing his sword, and moonlight was reflecting in it, or glinting, or something. And I was like, "There is no moonlight, dude." But I mean, forgivable.
So less structure in that it's not just the first day or the before section, but something that I really kind of latched onto on this reread. If you take a shot every time I say this reread or this read, I'm so sorry. You are going to be blacked out drunk. But I was so touched by the Moon Goddess's story. And not just the third day, but her learning her backstory and how there's this sense of jealousy and really greed and selfishness to her, but it's still so beautiful that she doesn't want to give up her place in the moon and have someone take over, because she wants to be the one. How can someone appreciate these people, the humans, this world as much as I do? And that's the thing that started it all, is this simultaneously dual-sided aspect of love and greed and selfishness. Or that wouldn't even be dual, that'd be like trifecta. I don't know, whatever. And it's so good. I'm gonna
separate but
I really
related.
want to touch on this really quickly.
Go ahead.
So what Evie was saying. So when she was a moon, she didn't have these traits. It was only when she became a human did she begin having these traits. There was something touched on with, she didn't care. All she wanted to do was shine her light. She wanted to help everybody, right? As the moon, there was her talking about me giving my light to these people and just having comfort in watching them dance to my moonlight, things like that. She falls from the moon, she becomes human, and then she gets all of our horrible traits, our jealousies, our need for power, our things like, or things like that. But she comes too late to realize her faults that she has since passed down to her these children that she has had. I think that was fantastic, and another theme that I picked up rereading this book upon the second time.
That heavy pressure of parental influence was a heavy theme going on through the book. I really liked how you handled that. Yeah.
Totally separate thing, but related to the moon. At some point, I was asking myself, I was like, the inverted theater, that's a really weird name for something. Did anyone else have a feeling or idea why the theater was inverted?
Well, I mean, it kind of tells you in the...
Does it?
In the story. It's the mirror.
Yeah, I think it's the light shining on the water from the moon, right? Or something. There was
it's a reflection of the theater in the water, was my idea. I don't remember if that's actually explicitly laid out in the book. Maybe it is, and I'm just forgetting.
Touched very slightly, I believe, in that first huge chapter. Mm-hmm.
Well, they talk about like either Kima or June, one of the two. No, I think it was Kima. When Kima and June are traveling to what is the inverted theater, one of them realizes the other is opposite. It's flipped. So left is right, right is left. And they realize that.
Like a reflection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
You have to go, guys. I'm sorry. I have a commitment, but this was awesome, and I will catch up with this stuff later.
All right.
Good to see you again, Jared. It's been so long.
On, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining the read along, bud.
Yep. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
There you go. Usman's got it. I took it as a reflection of the story, the way the moon reflected the water.
Oh. Yeah, Usman is another one who another friend of mine that joined the read along, and from his thoughts, I think he really loved this book as well. So there's just so much in this book, and the man, like the characters. So these three terrors, I just loved, and so yes, I love what Matt was saying. How we definitely start this story believing that the Emperor is our main antagonist here. We are, oh my God, ruled by the Moon Throne. This guy is despicable. He's a horrible person. We meet him within the first chapter. He is exploded, but he loses his bird in this first chapter and kills somebody, and that bird comes back to be someone else. And wow, I think I missed it on the first read on my headset, and I redid it. I reread it. I re-listened to it, and I picked it up, and I was just fantastic. These horror elements, these darker elements were fantastic. This Lubu was a despicable human being that you despise this guy, and
Lubu is the worst of everyone in the entire book.
But did he make you feel sorry for him a little bit?
Totally.
Being, I guess, the middle child, I think that was his gripe.
I wouldn't say I exactly felt sorry for him, but there was a moment where I was like, I can understand having real difficulty being a child that gets no attention from its mother. You know, like there was a bit there where I had a moment of compassion with him. I was like, yes, that's difficult. And you are a monster anyway. And that is unforgivable. I'm not excusing it because you maybe had some reasons, but yeah, just like such an amazing portrayal of a totally sick child who's been horribly neglected. Yeah.
The only positive attribution I have towards Luubu is that he's a painter. And that's the one thing of beauty that he has. Otherwise, he's just, for me, he's just so cruel and selfish and demanding and narcissistic and oh god,
he puts in a call for somebody to move a boat in the right direction for his painting.
Yeah.
Like he's sitting in his castle chilling, painting, and he's like, the tide drifted that boat a little to the left, and he's like, turns over to the turtles like, yo, go tell them down there to move that boat.
Yeah.
And the guys are like tugging the boat to put it in the exact same spot. He's like, right there. And then
that was
great.
That was where, even though he was a painter, and I studied painting, I related to that a little bit, that he's a painter. But at that moment, I thought, no, you are actually just a monster.
Yeah.
Like being a painter does not redeem you. You are a monster.
So that's just moving a boat. That's not a big deal. Like Chadia said, it's the dancing girl that was like making her dance over and over and over again, not even forcing her to dance, but making everyone else around her encouraging her to dance. Because he could have used his voice to say, "Hey,
bloody
you need
footprints
to
on the floor and the vision,
just the moving
vivid
the boat
description.
The moving the boat to me is an example of exactly the same thing. It has less horrific consequences, but it's basically a guy who thinks the entire world is just there to do what he wants.
Yeah.
Right. And instead of, what you do as a painter, if the boat isn't in the right place, is you paint it in a different place. Like painters do it all the time. But no, he's like, I need to have the perfect picture. So let's rearrange the world for my taste, for my entertainment, and that was just a demonstration with no real consequences of exactly the things he does after that,
The dancing scene reminded me specifically of like the myth of the 12 dancing princesses.
What's that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Because they just keep dancing and dancing and dancing until they
die. Basically.
What myth is that? Is that from what?
I think it's a Russian fairy tale. I think.
Yeah. And give me the premise. Like these ballerinas or dancers all need to dance and they
it's 12
until
sisters
they die.
that
okay.
At night they get compelled to dance, and then they do it over and over and over, and then one night they just don't stop dancing until they all fall in. Basically.
That's interesting. I like
the House of Salt and
sick.
Sorrows. The House of Salt and Sorrows is a retelling of that.
Yeah.
Really
I'm
good.
actually reading that this month.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of fairy stories, not fairy tales, but like stories of the fairy, where
it's just dark. So
fairies,
dark.
Fairies will invite a woman to dance when she's out walking through the forest, and she's never seen again because she's dancing forever. Not until she dies, because that would be too easy. They just keep her there dancing forever.
I need to read more dark fairy tales.
Yeah. Evie, did that remind you of a certain scene that happens, or multiple scenes that happen in Jonathan Strange?
Yes.
Because I was like, oh my God, this is Jonathan Strange. Holy crap.
That's why I brought this up earlier. Maybe I before we came on, I asked Evie about Jonathan Strange. Of course, I told her 7 different names until I got it right. It was Strange Jonathan And
Doctor Strange and
yeah, like and she was like looking at me, and she's like, "Are you talking about Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell?" I'm like, "That's it. That's the one."
Jonathan Strange.
Jonathan, see, I messed it up again.
It's so good.
Yeah, I was really interested in that.
Doctor Strange is Marvel.
This is a good point that Epic brings up. This because Lubu is essentially a three-terror. He is a god, so he does have this god complex. That the world should be revolving around him. Alicia, did you like some of these characters that you ran into in this story? Some of your favorites, maybe, or some that you hated?
I love the making the turtle like the servant, I guess. I don't know what the
tortoise.
Tortoise. Yeah. I don't know. It always interests me when they make a animal like a sentient character.
Defect, Defect. Defect. I love Defect so much. I will just, oh god.
Defect is simultaneously the best and the most horrible animal companion ever. He's like, I mean, this was something that I thought was, for me, almost completely unique in fantasy. This book focused more on smell than any book I've ever read. Especially any fantasy book I've ever read. It talked about smell all the time, and especially the whole thing with Defect. I was like, can you please get out of the wagon? Every time anything was happening in the wagon, I'm like, I can't get over how it stinks in that wagon.
I know Joanna's got
she said
in the chat anymore, but she literally sent me messages of I cannot stand with how she has a
deal with the smells. Yeah.
And again, that he was the craftsmanship that Jimenez was able to convey and convey smell through text.
Yep.
Who does that? No one other than Simon Jimenez that I've been able to tell.
I haven't read anything like that with regards to smell. I mean, with regards to many aspects of the book, but the focus on odors was throughout the book. I mean, the worst of it really is basically Defect, but then also the focus.
Latrines. The latrines.
Yeah, the latrines, but also the focus. It was interesting because the focus on smell with Defect then made me imagine smells he wasn't describing later. Just because it was already so somehow present in my head, connected to the book.
Yeah,
we were in other places, and I was imagining how it smelled, even though he wasn't actually describing how it smelled.
The wagon meetups and things like that, when people came together, he didn't really have to provide those smell. All he had to do was kind of describe a shabby person's dress or how they think. And yes, that those smells, I think, definitely came in after he did the description of Defect's odor. And I can see that being hard for somebody to process, especially he's oozing. This thing is oozing, and it is very visceral and graphic. And
have you ever smelled a corpse?
No, only maybe roadkill. I've walked up on as a kid on 76 out here in Philadelphia.
I know exactly what
a possum or something like that. Yeah.
So turtles
they stink bad.
They stink.
I think that I have rolled up on a stinky turtle before.
Turtles
actually.
are
and then add the literal infection that Defect
a cracked shell, the maggots coming out of it. You could get really bad in there. Yep. Here it comes.
Yeah.
All right.
It's good.
take camera
I
off.
had to pause after they were talking about the maggots. I was like, I got to put this down for a little bit.
Yeah, it's very true. Because then every scene. Go ahead, Matt. I'm
very
sorry.
visceral. Everything is so visceral.
That's what I wanted to say. Like on the negative side and the positive side.
Yeah.
Like everything in the entire book is super intense and visceral. Like when Lubu is eating his mother's finger, it's it's straight there. I mean, the way he writes it, you can't turn away. You can turn away from reading it, but if you are reading it, you are just getting it. You're witnessing someone eating another person's finger, his mother's finger, you know. But also then like the I was talking to Jared earlier about this. I thought it was amazing how it was done with Kima and June getting to know each other. Because I mean, I'm an extremely straight guy, right?
That you know of. Come on.
If anyone knows, it's me. So I still, when I was reading about two kids, and they really are kids, June and Kima, I don't know if it's ever really said exactly how old they are, but
they're like 15, 16.
Like, yeah,
that's what I thought of. Yeah.
Mid-teens is what I was thinking as well. Like in this culture, mid-teens, if you want to get close to another guy, what you do is fight. Like when I was in high school, like I was in an all-boys Catholic school, and there were fights all the time. It doesn't mean everybody was uncertain about their sexuality, but it's just what happens with teenage boys all the time. And then these two guys fighting, but what they're really doing is they're getting intimate physically. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not having sex. I mean, not until later, but they're using the fighting as an excuse to get as close as possible to each other, to touch each other, to do something which isn't necessarily socially acceptable, and experience that without saying, I'd like to be closer to you and why don't we kiss or whatever, you know, something like that. So that was also super visceral. And then when it finally does get to the point where they really are intimate, it's also super visceral. Like everything was right there and you can't look away from it. You can't imagine it in a softer or less confronting way. You know, his prose is remarkable.
I think it was Joanna that mentioned that, like, how toxic masculinity is explored throughout this novel, and it's through the violence.
It's all about toxic masculinity.
Yeah, and, like, I mean,
every male in the entire book is a disaster.
Yeah, and it's this idea
the women
that
aren't much better, but
they aren't either. But
it's just this idea that, like, you don't know how to display or manage your emotions, so you do it through violence. And I can't believe it's taken me an hour to mention this, but in my interview with the author, I mentioned that, and I just kind of commented on how, you know, the rhythm throughout this story includes the violence, and you go from the violence to the intimacy where Kima wants to connect with June, but and he almost says it, and I can't remember the exact words, but like he didn't know how to connect with him other than literally just trying to punch him. I think it was in the cave. So
it's this thing. We don't know how to connect with other men.
Yeah.
And this is a thing when you grow up, and we talk about camaraderie, right? There seems to be a violent atmosphere around that word, camaraderie. So when we talk about camaraderie, that's it seems that is a little more male based, and camaraderie could be more toward battle. That's when these men finally, and it's violence that brings this closeness for these men. And it's as we grow up, boys fight boys, and we do not, we're not able to express feelings for other men, and it's done through violence. It's done through even my buddies now, that are from New Jersey, and I call them up and I'm like, "What's up, you piece of crap?" Like I insult him. It's not like, "Hey man, how's it going with you?" Like I really care. I can't act like I really care because that's
some
not.
of that though in our
Mhm.
world is a cultural thing. Like not so much in Germany,
That's
but
true.
in some places in Europe, you be walking down the street and you'll see two guys with their arms linked.
Yeah.
Just walking together, and they're not gay.
Mhm.
They might be, but they can't all be. Like it would be like 50% of all Italian men would be gay because you see it everywhere in Italy. It's super common. Or like an arm around their friend's shoulders just while they're walking down the street. Spain as
in
well, yeah.
South America, people
Yeah.
greet each other with kisses, men and
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
Men and women. There is no separate there. It's for both genders.
In Europe,
that's not
basically
done
everywhere.
in America.
In Europe, basically everywhere, it's just a number. It's always a question of how many.
Mhm.
I mean, on the cheeks. Like, I think the Swiss it's 3 for some reason, and Germany it's usually 2, and in different countries it's always. But yeah, it's pretty common for men and women, or women and women, or men and men. No big deal.
Yeah, not too common
No.
in the States.
Or in Australia or England or
Right.
anywhere. But yeah.
So I think oh my gosh, Saam is a great example of that. He's this very violent, the first terror. He's a very violent person. Hey, he's a very violent person, but he undoubtedly loves his sons, particularly June. But him being forced to kill all of his sons is one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've ever read in my entire life.
Good. It was so good and visionary.
That is the peak of horror in the whole book.
It was so heartbreaking.
So like I just came in at the perfect moment because that was my favorite scene in the book. I reread that thing over and over, and each time, it broke my heart in a different way because, Jimenez just kept hitting like all these emotional notes, and I was distraught, but I was enjoying the experience of having these emotions pulled from deep within me because
Epic, you're a bit of a masochist, aren't you?
I think I am.
He likes the darker stuff, like, man. I can't,
I read that whole scene and put the book down for a bit.
Yeah, I had to put it down.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm over it. Yep.
Like so the thing is that after, like, if you've read books for a long time, right, like to get an emotion, to get a genuine emotion pulled out of you that strongly, it's not something I experience all the time. So experiencing that, like that scene, oh my god, I was like immediately, like, I'm definitely going to be talking about this book throughout this year. What a scene.
Yeah.
What a scene. And then it's like,
well,
how everything came
sequence,
together.
That whole sequence with Lubu, and it goes from one horrifying thing to another with the dancer and his mother's finger, and then his brother turns up and has to kill his own boys, and plus
the build up with like the guy coming on the bear, and the bear, like, trying to like get there in time. Oh my god!
Putting his head back on.
Yes.
That dude, we were getting a talking head throughout this whole book. I freaking loved it, and that scene you were talking about, I remember a particular part where, he finally enters the room, he's about to go after his brother, and the floor is littered with the blood of his kids, and he does some magic, he scoops the blood up and it sends spikes of blood at Lubu, and I was like, this is fantastic. And then all of a sudden, the other terrorist starts running after Lubu, and like the squelch of the blood of his kids that he's running through. It was mind blowing. It was so good, that part.
And then it all ends with the moon goddess literally crunching them together into a cube and eating them.
Oh man, I'm telling you,
Good.
So
it was so good.
It's funny. Like Jimenez was able to make you feel for these characters that were so despicable. I felt so bad for him, like the first terror, because it's like having to, like, the one thing he actually cared about were his kids. So, and like through whatever he did, and you could never doubt the love and affection he had for his kids, and having to like go through that, and just like the build up, like I remember, like it felt so visceral. Like I felt like I was in the scene at the time it was happening, and that is something that Jimenez does so well as well, like being able to make you feel like you're there, whether it's through smell,
intensity,
whether it's through, like, there are just these details he includes in his descriptions that just makes the picture so clear to you. And I watched the full interview on your channel where you interviewed him, and I was just like, I watched it from start to finish, because in my mind this guy is like so good.
Yeah.
And we're lucky because he's pretty young.
He's younger than
he's
I
working
am.
on something.
Means he's going to be writing a lot of books.
I hope so.
I mean, he's already started pretty young, and he's written, I don't know about Vanished Birds, haven't read it yet, but I've heard it's good. And he's written at least one like stunning book, which we're talking about, and that's his second book. That's the thing. That's the main question I have for him, is like, how did you do that?
He was
How does your brain work?
It's your second book.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is he was contracted for this book. He pitched it to his publisher, and he got a contract out of it. So he was contracted to write it. It wasn't a case of like, oh, this is my passion project. This is the book I've always wanted to write, and I'm going to write the entire thing, and then I'm going to submit it for publication. No, he was contracted for this.
Yeah.
And he was only contracted with the pitch of it's a 5-day journey on a quest to return something. That's it. Everything else was this simultaneous defiance and homage to the fantasy genre. And it's so...
It's incredible that like he packed so much within 5 days in a book. That is actually incredible.
And it's not a very thick book. I mean, we're fantasy readers, yeah. We're used to reading insanely huge books or
it's
series.
Just slightly over 500, at least in my copy.
It's like it's smaller than every single Malazan book, right? And there's so much in here. I mean, that's one of the like, to mention Malazan again. It's one of the things Erickson does very well as well, is present you with a kind of two-dimensional outside sketch of a bad guy, and then bring you to a point where you have to sympathize with him a little, at least a little, like Sa'am, the first terror, is presented as nothing but just evil and doesn't care about humans at all. He'll kill anybody who gets in his way, sometimes just because he's bored, whatever, but he cares about his kids. And then we have to watch him unable to not murder all of them, and at that point my heart breaks for him. Yeah, exactly. One after the other, excruciatingly. And at that point, my heart breaks for him over and over and over again. And I forget about, like, actually, like,
he's a dick.
He probably kind of deserves this, really. Like, it's kind of justice in a way.
In that scene, he was just a father, man. He was just a father.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's incredible. And it's like this is a writer I'm definitely going to be following, because like you mentioned, this is just his second book, yet like his command of the English language is remarkable. It feels like he's playing with it like it's a toy. Like it looks like he could have written it in like 10 different ways, but then he chose that one because, I don't know, it was the first one his eyes fell upon. Like he's such a his book makes you enjoy, the work in an abstract way and in a way that you're engrossed in it as well. I want to pull. So I'm writing a book myself, and there's this thing like where you're analyzing it as a writer, you're trying to see what he does there. I only do that in hindsight. Sometimes I'm able to do it simultaneously while I'm reading. So it's like my brain is split in two. I'm experiencing it as a reader and I'm experiencing it as a writer. Okay, this is what he did there. Oh, this is why I care. But each time I kept getting lost reading it as a reader. And that was such a nice experience because the way he just draws you in with his command of the English language.
Yeah.
I'm almost scared to see what he does next because like he wrote one book and it was science fiction and apparently really good science fiction. And then he's like, okay, I did science fiction. Now we'll do a fantasy book. And he does a fantasy book and we're all like, dude, how'd you do that? Okay. So what's his next book going to be? And I wanted to say, like, I watched Evie's interview, of course, as well, more than once. And when he said that when his first draft didn't have the first, second, third person in it, it didn't have the story wrapped in a story in it. It was just sort of a 5-day quest kind of, the main story that is happening on the stage in the inverted theater. It was just that. Like, really? Like, I believe you, but I don't believe you. Like, you started this without any of the things in it that make it unique.
Yeah.
The perspective shifts.
Yeah, I mean, like all of that stuff to me is what the book is. Like the nested stories and the shifting constantly between these different perspectives, different places, different times, kind of. I was like, that's the story. How did you start the story without the story in it? I don't get it. He must have a super interesting process.
I wonder like how much of that is subconscious and how much of that is actual conscious decision, because he does something that I feel Michael Fletcher also does very well, is that there is no aspect of the story you can take out without it being incredibly obvious, in the sense that like the prose works with the prose works with the characters. The characters work with the world. The world works like it feels so integrated. So like it's like I don't see any piece that can be taken out, and like the essence of the story still remaining what it is. He was able, like the package of the book itself is just so.
If it didn't have the constant perspective shifts, it would just be an interestingly written, well written. But yeah, just another fantasy story.
Yeah.
Don't tell Persuasion by Jane Austen, or Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, or Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, or Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. But this is my favorite book of all time. And
really, I'm shocked to hear you say that, Evie.
I know, right?
It never would have occurred to me that this would be your favorite book.
Well, so I was
it
just
might be mine as well, actually. I haven't read as much as everybody probably on in this on this stream here, but it was just a perfect. It wrapped up within those 500 pages that you were talking about, and there were every part of this story I remember, every part of it hit home, every character's thread typically knotted up, and I thought it was just perfect in my opinion. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was going to say, like, the reason that this is my favorite book is because what you were saying, Epic, is that there's not a single thing that I would remove from this book. Any aspect, any thread, any scene, any character, everything is so purposeful to the whole that it's perfection to me. And I cry a little inside when people don't recognize its perfection, and it's fine. It's fine. reading is subjective, but it's fine.
So
I'm a little bit
I
of a
do have
masochist sometimes myself, and I went to Goodreads to read the 1-star reviews, and
I
so
wouldn't do that, yeah.
I have to admit there was one thing about the book that I didn't like.
All right, go ahead. I want to hear
this,
it.
this is but this is more of a very subjective thing, and I understand it's just me, right? But what I didn't like how everything wrapped up so nice and dandy. Like I prefer like kind of like a bittersweet, like melancholy ending that that haunts you after you've dropped the book. I have like a little like issue with, because when everything wraps up, then it strikes you, oh, I'm reading a book, like.
So, counter argument. It's a love story to its blade dented bone, and you know what love stories have happily ever after. So this is Jimenez's happily ever after.
Yeah,
But
and Jimenez
he hinted it throughout the
honestly,
book as well.
he gave me more than enough trauma throughout the book. Like there are scenes that will haunt me until I die out of this book. They're just not the ending, and having a nicely wrapped up love story ending after all of that, I found actually kind of a relief.
You need that reprieve from all the heaviness of it.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the first two terrors, by the way. This discussion is gonna last for like 6 hours because we're only scratching the surface, buddy. But yeah, can we talk about the third terror and then get back to defect, because I can talk about defect for hours. But the third terror, who is unnamed, who is the bird, who is this transformative, literally shape-shifting creature, who, this is the character that I have the most compassion for. He's literally a monster, but he just wants to be loved and have connection, and him the ending scene where he's just curled up around the bones of his mother, the moon goddess. Yeah.
It's funny how
he's the one of the main reasons I know I will read this book again, because to me the first and second terror are very easy to grasp. Like they're just people. They're people with weird powers who do horrible things, but like you can point at them and they're pretty straightforward. And the third terror is kind of a mystery. I feel vague on him in some way, because you have to rethink a lot of things. Once you figure out what he is, who he is, you have to rethink a lot of things. It's like, oh, okay, he was the bird. So he was kind of guiding them the whole time, or at least trying to. They were ignoring him most of the time, but like he was trying to help them. He was trying to guide them. Like you said, he's basically, in a way, he's kind of he's still a child. He has the mind of a child, basically, and he just wants to be loved, and he doesn't really have any complex thoughts. And he was much harder to grasp for me. I don't have a clear idea of him.
He was the most sympathetic because of that.
Well, he was certainly the most sympathetic of the three. Yeah.
He was the one with the most trauma of the three, and we see this when one person, other than the guard lady, the cleaning lady, other than that person, Kima becomes the only person that's ever done anything good to this person by setting them free. And they, being that so young, and they automatically fall in love with that person because they've never experienced that from any other human being. And that's
there's your disturbing, haunting ending, Epic. Like
so what was
the third terror gets a disturbing, haunting ending because he falls in love with a guy who was already in love with another guy. Can't have him. He finally gets his mother.
Oof.
Well, actually, not really. Like she's also gone.
Just
yeah, exactly. Like
all he gets to do is cuddle with hard bones.
He is a horrible tragedy.
Yes.
Or you know, it's the pattern with the terrors is something I like. All of them are like victims of really really bad parenting, and
Exactly. Yeah.
like it's interesting how, you know, each of them responded to it. So the first terror like responded to like the lack of acceptance and affection by making his own family, and that was what was precious to him. The middle child, the Lubu, the second terror was you know, kind of obsessed with controlling everything because of how much little control he actually felt he had, and like you know, that lack of like not being seen, and that affected him. Like they were all affected to the extreme. And then the last one completely was not accepted by his father, his mother, was not even acknowledged and everything. And then, you know, getting that acknowledgement from Kima, you know, and it was very sad that when Kima like realized what he was, like Kima also had to reject him because Kima had to kill him. So that was like, you know, all the tragedy and okay, I've finally shown you some love and acceptance, but like when I finally realize what you actually are, I have to kill you. So that's like another level of rejection again. So even when they were fighting, like my heart was broken for him, you know. And it's incredible how, like, you know, like the character interaction in the books are so layered. So it's like you never feel so straightforward about, you know, how you feel events are happening for any individual character. It is always mixed, and you know, it's like that is what gets you to that level of engagement where, you know, this is his first fantasy book he's writing, his second book ever, but it's like on the list of someone's favorite book ever. Like, are you like, it's the this dude is the truth, man.
Yeah, and it's funny. You know, you mentioned about Kima rejecting the third terror. That Kima's perpetrating the rejection that he himself has experienced, and he knows what it feels like to be rejected, and he doesn't want that, but yet he rejects the third terror.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's just my heart breaks. But
Yeah,
Like,
the third terror is the worst one.
If the terrors were not so dangerous, you just want to like hug them and, you know, tell them it's gonna be okay.
And then send them to therapy for the rest
Yeah,
of their
send them to
lives.
therapy, you know. Yes, like try and like adjust them back into society so that, you know, they can find some kind of happiness and solace.
But they're all like permanently broken. Like they are so broken. You cannot fix any of them. Like the first terror, they just get worse and worse. Like the first terror is the one who is most a person. You know, he's just a guy, like, and he's got these horrible powers, and he doesn't give a damn about anybody except his sons. But he's just a guy. And then it turns out, actually, no, he's not just a guy. He's a talking head in a jar. And the second one, like, we didn't talk about him eating the mother tortoise. Oh my God.
That's a great segue going back to Defect.
So much.
That's another tragic part. That is another tragic part is Defect. He is Defect.
Defect's so tragic.
And him, the joy that he experiences finally getting a message from his mother and finally connecting with his mother. This has been his dream, and it's not his mother. It's Blue sending the message.
Yeah.
And then the moon goddess knows, she feels the disconnect that something dies. And so she thinks it's Ubu because but it's the mother tortoise. And oh God.
And Lubu ate that thing. He ate it even while it was rotting. He, like it's like
while it was still alive.
While it was still it was begging him to.
The tortoises just in general, like at the beginning, the tortoises are this totally weird fantasy thing, which I just thought, wow, this is super creative and
Yes,
interesting
definitely.
with these telepathic tortoises that giggle all the time. And then when Defect experiences his first kind of real moment of freedom, like when they're floating down the river and he's counting all of the stuff, he's counting the grass, he's counting the bugs,
Yeah, he's just
and
watching.
he's just like
Yeah.
overjoyed. Like
Yep.
it's the first time he's ever had any freedom, you know. And then he gets a message from his mother and he's overjoyed. And then we realize what happened to his mother and where the message came from. And it's just,
And the arrow.
oh my God.
To the frickin' dude, if anybody's getting on this now, there are spoilers. An arrow to the frickin' neck. And it was so, vivid.
So,
And
yeah,
heartfelt.
But you don't have
and it was a
time to
punch.
you don't have time to suffer about that because we go
process
straight
this.
into Lubu being Lubu.
Yeah.
It's just like,
you know,
ah.
it's such brilliant writing because it's just like you like.
Oh, by the
you
way,
never-
Defect's dead.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
like,
Now we're moving into Lubu.
Yeah,
and Kima can't
so-
move. He's
Oh
just sitting
my
there
God.
about to get his head
my
taken
God.
off.
It's so
Oh
bad.
my God.
It's so bad.
Uh,
The third, what
like-
is that? That is the third day, right? The third day is just so
Bonkers.
over the top traumatic. It's like there were so many bits in this book that reminded me of wuxia movies, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or those kinds of movies, where it's just like this over the top kind of, and the whole fight scene in the third, like between the boats, first or secondly, but like also the like you said, Dan, where the first terror takes all of the blood up off the floor and turns it into spikes that fly across the room.
You're talking about when he meets his end, the first terror, when he runs across the water, like a skipping stone.
Yeah.
And that wuxia, you were talking about that Crouching Tiger feel when he was,
and
when
so like when Kima gets, when I forget her name, but the water spirit smashes him through the other side of the ship, and he goes flying out of the ship and lands in the water. It was just like the action stuff was so over the top wuxia feeling, and I totally didn't expect it. Like up until the third day, most of the action is pretty down to earth.
And then
and then the third day, it's like, whoa, okay, this is crazy town. What's going on?
No, now the gods are fighting. Like now it's like it's not like any of that, like and it's like the way it happened too, because after he does the spikes, like the spikes come towards him. And then Lubu stops it in the air, and then it's just like, wow, this is not gonna be like an easy fight. And then they just clash. And then
way back at which one is it? It's Rabbit checkpoint, I think.
Rabbit Gate.
Yeah.
Rabbit Gate, where Kima gets the spear. And I mean, that was also pretty epic. Like the first terror explodes one gate, and Grandma Moon explodes the other gate so they can leave. Like visually in my head, that was pretty epic as well.
Yeah.
And obviously it's magic. It's not that down to earth, but like most of the other stuff was basically people doing people things. But then the third, like once we get to the lake, the bowl, what's it called? The Bowl of Heaven?
That's
yeah.
With the boats, and that's where Lubu is, and all of that. Once we get there, it's just like, okay, no holds barred. Everything's on the table. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Nuts.
Like, something else I found very interesting, also very twisted as well, was how like the mother always admitted at some point that she loved like at least the first and the second terror. Like she admitted, like she was like, it was like it's a twisted feeling, like she loves and she hates them so much, and it's just like how everything is just so multi-layered that it just gets you. It just gets you.
From now on, if any of my friends are like any of the couples I know, they get pregnant, I'm going to give them this book. Like this is a manual.
Don't do this.
For how not to be a horrible, horrible parent.
Wait,
and
so
what could happen if you are.
Let's be real though. Wasn't their mother essentially kidnapped and thrown in a prison and was unable to, react with them and give them that affection and that connection?
Totally.
And that they longed for it, and they tried to find it in their father, who, again, that toxic masculinity, power, control, all those things. And these, three are essentially just victims themselves.
Although, to be honest, I never had the feeling, from what Jimenez gave us anyway, I never had the feeling that the moon would have been a particularly good mother even if she was free. Like,
just how she treated what's the name of the son? How
Sam?
How she treated him was tough.
I had the feeling the whole time, and this totally makes sense to me because she was the moon. Like, she existed to see her reflection in the water. And that, to me, was like the essence of her character. That was, there didn't need to be anything else. Like, she was narcissistic in a way, and she was in love with the water. But she was in love with the water because the water reflected her. And that, as a mother, isn't really a great start,
Yeah.
Even if she had been free.
Yeah.
Sorry, Evie, you wanted to say something.
No, I was just gonna say that it's would literally was it the emperor found when he was a child at the door where the goddess is kept in that like basement area, and beats him so much that he never went back.
Yeah.
And it also goes two ways though. I would wonder if, even if through the door, if they were able to have some sort of connection, if the moon goddess would have been able to have more empathy, compassion, love for her sons. Even though she says she loves them, like, she's willing to sacrifice them for,
her means
to create the terror or destroy the emperor. Yeah.
Even hearing, even reading her saying she loves them. And I mean, I've seen parents like this on both sides. Some parents love their children because they made them. And some parents love their children because of who they are. And obviously one of those is better, I think, for the children and everyone involved. And it always seemed to me like she loved them because they were of her, because she was in love with herself, and not because of what and who they were.
But they were terrible, terrible people. So I wouldn't want to love them either because of who they were.
Sure.
So it's a vicious cycle of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was locked away before they became these terrible people. I'm not exactly sure what age their father, the emperor, right, throws her in this prison. So I'm not sure at what age that they are abandoned by their mother, though I do believe that, there are flash memories from at least one from Sam, which is the first terror, of him interacting with his mother, but her being thrown away, and then him going to the door of the wolf door and sensing her in there, but maybe even sensing that she didn't even want him outside the door. I think that was something touched on, but from what I got was that she was taken captive, thrown behind this wolf door, and they were still young. And that she saw, I guess she started seeing her ways and wasn't there to correct her ways.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Nature versus nurture.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alicia. I'm sorry.
It brings up the nature versus nurture question
Mm-hmm.
with children, with raising children.
Yeah.
And of course, with that, there's a combination of both.
Yeah, exactly.
And at least,
But it was pretty clearly, especially with the second and third terror, it was made really clear that they, at least, a lot of what they was because they wanted but never got any love from their mother.
Right.
You know, and I mean, like,
and
we
their
can't
father,
discount
I
having
think,
such a disastrous father. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think they, always feeling a disappointment to their father. Obviously, we sense that in Sam, but he, at one point, decided like he didn't really care. He didn't want to be an emperor. He was cool with being this general of the Red Peacocks. And he didn't seem like, he knew his father did not approve of everything he did, because that seemed to be what type of father he was, critiquing everything. And Lubu didn't get attention. I love that part where they're like, we knew your father wasn't coming to your party because he never comes to your parties. And, Lubu wanting that, connection with his father.
How could you even imagine that he would come?
Yeah, what are you doing? Why would you even throw
you
a
an
party
idiot?
and tell people he's coming? He's not.
Yeah.
So this
Never has.
But we do
did everybody?
see that.
This just reminded me of, just to quickly ask, did everybody read the hardback edition?
I read the hardback. I didn't go. You mean inside there? I didn't go in there.
Like, because unfortunately in the paperback, they take this amazing, beautiful map of kind of the world, but also kind of a dreamscape, and they printed it in black and white, which is a crime against humanity as far as I'm concerned.
I think you're right.
This is stunning.
So I will have to make sure to put a link to the article in the Discord, but Simon Jimenez wrote an article about like propaganda about maps, and specifically talking about how, the propaganda maps and stuff like that, and how that map that Chris Panettiere created, who is also an author, by the way, just saying, how that really really evokes that kind of the oh my god, what's the word I just said?
Propaganda.
There you go, the propaganda stuff. But before I forget, because I will forget, to switch back to the whole kind of daddy issues talk, essentially.
That's the secret name of this book.
It's true, daddy issues.
The spear cuts through daddy issues.
Uhi Araya definitely had them as well. There's some fucked up daddies in this one.
Yeah,
it's true. But it's amazing how it's not really amazing. It is interesting to look at the story of the moon goddess and the emperor and the three terrors, and then look at that other layer of you and his father and Lola, and how you are trying to connect with your father, but your father leaves, and your father thinks of this story as camaraderie and about it's focusing on the violence, but your Lola's like, no, this is a love story. And you're getting these two contrasting but also seemingly like opposite things, but they're actually they're the same thing at the same time, if that makes sense. They're simultaneously. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, these stories were just crazy layered. Like, there's a lot behind everything in this book in a standalone at that. But with that, I want to do some final thoughts here, because we are running on a 2-hour thing. And, I got to get back to life. It's behind me, waiting for me. But I want to do some final thoughts. Evie, why don't you give us some final thoughts? We already know you love this book. And I don't know, just tell us why, this really resonates with you so much.
It's going to sound weird, but, well, not really weird, but I think then the structural intent and execution of the story is the thing that hooked me, and the thing that really the unusualness aspect of the narrative structure and the storytelling made me more deeply connected to every aspect of it. And how all these characters are so, there's the literal layers of the story, but also the layers of all the characters, and they're, you could read them as surface level, as caricatures, as very not one dimensional, but almost one dimensional. But if you put in the effort, if you really connect with the story, the way that I did, I feel like you would get the depth of emotional connection to all of the characters, even the debatably bad ones, or evil ones. There's just connection with every aspect to this story for me. And Pete, from Ponderings with Pete, I was like, oh, this story is really about compassion. He's like, oh, so it's Malazan number 11. And so, yes, I guess supposedly, much like Malazan, it's all about compassion. And I just really connected with that in this story. And that it stands on its own and is a single, standalone fantasy novel is great. So, please read this book. If I can't shut up about, one day I'll shut up about it, but not today.
I don't know if you ever will. I don't believe that. I don't think.
Matt, go ahead. What are your final thoughts on this book?
Yeah, I mean, basically what Evie said. Really, I came for the wildly experimental and original structure and prose, and I stayed for the emotional trauma. Basically,
Yeah.
like I am surprised. Like I said, I very early in the book I started thinking, okay, author, you're doing something that I kind of think may not work in the end, but I'm going to stick with it so I can witness the train wreck. And it never wrecked, and he never failed with something that maybe shouldn't really have worked that as well as it did, and managed inside all of that to tell an amazing action story, an amazing love story, an amazing trauma story, an amazing story about like parents and sons. Just yeah, I'm here for it. I will definitely read it again.
Parents, sons,
And this was my
families,
second
weaves.
read. So yeah, it was
Alicia, how about you?
amazing book.
I initially was intimidated because people told me I wasn't going to understand it the first time I read through, and because this was my first time. So like when people tell you that, you're just like, then I don't want to pick it up if it's not going to make sense, at least somewhat on the first read.
Mm-hmm.
That
But,
was
like,
bad advice.
Yeah. So I went into it just thinking, I'll give it a shot. If it doesn't work, I'll put it down. And then I hit a certain point in the book, and then I literally, my boyfriend can attest to this. He thought he's like, are you going to set the book on fire? You're turning the pages so fast.
Probably day 3. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly when everything hit. And I was like, everything's making sense now. But I
can't stop.
Yeah. I still think rereading it, I'll pick up more than I picked up this time. Even having this conversation, I definitely had things go over my head. And to me, it being a standalone was a huge plus, because everything in sci-fi and fantasy is multiple. And if they're usually not small. So when Evie told me about this, and then you told me about how it was connected to some classics that I like, I was like, I'm in. And then I actually read it, and I'm like, holy crap, it's Jane Austen and Jonathan Strange on steroids.
Yeah,
with wuxia.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
awesome. Mhm, I
highly
like that.
recommend. This was technically my first read of the year, so
Mhm.
I will definitely be rereading it, and it
It's
probably
all
will.
downhill from here. I'm so sorry, Alicia. In your
You
reading.
I can tell you from January to March, you're not completely wrong. I will be definitely rereading it, and I will definitely be reading The Vanished Birds next, hopefully.
Awesome.
I got Vanished Birds on my shelf waiting as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
I'm waiting for a copy.
Yeah.
How about you, Epic?
There are not a lot of books I read that make me feel like a kid again. Like this book made me feel like a kid, like, experiencing fantasy, and the fact that it's so different and original in its approach, in its medium, it's so refreshing to read. This is what I look for, like existentially. I'm always searching for like stories like this that are well told. Ultimately, I would say, I think you asked me to join this read along in November, and I was like, well, I have so much to do. I don't know. Let's see. And ultimately, it's like when Dan recommends a book for you, you have to check it out. And yeah, but I do have a very quick question. I don't want to drag this on for too long, but like just giving all the pain, the trauma that you go throughout, you experience throughout the journey, does this count as grimdark?
I think with
I
the
still don't know what
grimdark,
grimdark is. So
I think
That was going to be my
I'm
response.
still trying to figure it out. I just
so.
know
I
that when
think with
something is giving
grimdark,
a
it's more
strong,
about the world, and whether there is hope within this world. And to be honest, I think when we talk about the Moon Throne, there did not appear to be hope in that world. It appeared to be a grim, dark world because it is most of those cities were living in oppression, and it was a bleak outlook for everyone involved. Um, so this in that part, I think you can consider it grim, dark, and then I can think you can consider it literary when it comes to the you perspective. And, I think you can maybe categorize that in there, but this book can be categorized in my opinion, the new weird fiction category, where because it adds such an urban flavor and gives us this urban dialogue in a typical fantasy setting, contemporary urban dialogue in a typical fantasy setting. So I believe this book you really can't place this book anywhere, and I think it would be
I would
best in
call
new
it a
weird fiction.
mythological retelling of a myth that didn't exist.
hmm.
And
Yeah.
as far as
I like
Grimdark
that.
goes, is Grimdark allowed to have a happy ending?
I was gonna say, I did kind of imply that this is a romance book because it has a happily ever after. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. Is like I have mixed feelings about it because I read moments that was too wholesome to feel like it was grimdark, but then the emotional, like the downers in the book were really like they were really like downers. They were exciting, of course, but they
Yeah.
really like dragged me down in a way that I like, So yeah.
I
So
think
you
that
are a masochist. is what you're saying.
I
think
do
that
love that stuff. Mhm.
Drag me down in a way that I like.
rank. But yeah, no, I think that's the. I think I said it at the start of this discussion is like this simultaneous homage but defiance of genre, and not just fantasy. I mean, it's mostly primarily fantasy, but there's also incorporations of various tropes from other genres that are um honored and defied in this books, and I think that's what makes it so hard to pin down and
Yeah.
describe from a
Yeah.
genre perspective.
Telling someone it's a fantasy book gives them entirely the wrong idea. But it is a fantasy book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was told it was a sci-fi before I talked to Evie.
That's just
Wow.
totally wrong.
And that's
Yeah.
why I was like, I don't know, because sci-fi is not usually my genre. And then I talked to Evie. And
The Vanished Birds is
Birds
sci-fi.
is
The Vanished
sci-fi,
Birds is
yes.
definitely sci-fi, and this is definitely not sci-fi.
But yeah, man, this.
Anyways, what are your thoughts, Dan?
Mhm.
Your final thoughts?
Exactly.
Oh man, I don't have another hour. But listen, there's something that Epic just brought up about feeling like a kid again when you read something. Like when I'm sitting here reliving these scenes with you guys and just providing like snippets of the writing of these scenes, and I am the emotion, like when somebody mentions something, like I'm pumping my fist. And within this book, I think it's not like some books that are, five, 1,000 pages. That can occur to me in a book maybe once or twice, but I felt like reliving this book with you guys, that occurred to me like 10 freaking times in one cohesive story where I'm just like, yes, right there. What happened to, we were, discussing the first terror's demise, and there were so many good parts in this book that just, got me excited, intense, emotional. And it's just, it baffles me that can happen within, 525 pages. And I thought Simon Jimenez's writing was just absolutely beautiful, descriptive, uh, the structure unique. And I could talk about this book for hours and go through it meticulously because there's more than one theme here. It's not just about compassion, it's about family, it's about nature and nurture, and trauma, dealing with trauma, and being understanding, like we were being understanding with these three terrors that we have no business, liking in a book like this. And we understood it, understood maybe their motives for doing these despicable things. It was just such a fantastic story within a fantastic story. And I could talk about this book for hours. And I'm really excited to see what Simon Jimenez does in the future. If anybody that's watching this hasn't seen the interview with him on Evie's channel, go check that out because he did drop that he's working on something in a
But he
genre
was
that he didn't want.
he was
Yeah,
very tight with the details.
as he should be. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't
Don't
say
think about
anything.
So,
He didn't say anything about it, but he
And
is
I
working on another book.
And listen,
and
mhm.
the shameless self plug. Unless something has changed, Dan, we're reading The Vanished Birds this month in March on the Discord. So hopefully we can do
Ooh.
a discussion sometime in early.
Okay, maybe I have to look at my catalog over here. I have to,
Listen, we played this
mhm.
before, okay?
Okay, yeah.
We talked about it in the Discord.
We did talk about it in the Discord, and I have
Right,
to tell you,
I'm gonna do it
booktubers,
without you. There you go.
that's fine.
I can't
And
wait to start Sun Eater this month.
oh,
But once I'm done with the first book of Sun Eater, I'll join you for Vanished Birds because I need more Jimenez in my life.
yeah,
Yay!
Vanished Birds is also very good, and I ask anybody watching this, live discussion on replay now, go get both of his books, man. And I just hope to. I can't wait to see more from him. But he has set the bar very high with The Spear Cuts Through Water.
My
Guys,
goodness.
thank you for joining the read along with me in my Discord. It was such a pleasure to talk about these chapters with everyone here. I know it was tough not to be able to read ahead, and
I wanted to give
it
you
was
props for that,
impossible.
Dan, as well. I mean, I totally ignored the awesome structure.
And that's what I was hoping.
I was rereading anyway, but I wanted to give you props for that because I thought it was awesome the way you organized it with the chapters. There aren't that many chapters, so it's easier to do it. With a book
was
like this,
easy. Yeah.
But I loved the fact that there were okay, if you've read up to here, go in there and chat.
I think we all read ahead.
I also like that there wasn't as much of in the common chat, there wasn't as much covering up of stuff. It was all in separate sections because that does drive me crazy with some Discord.
Yeah, that's true. And I had a lot of fun doing it, breaking it down. I think Epic was one that he started reading it and he just blew through it. He was like, dude, that part was so amazing.
I can't even imagine anyone.
I'm so happy he came on too.
No,
What kind of self-control would you have to be like, okay, I just read to the end of day 2 and I'm going to wait a week.
Nah.
No.
Yeah,
That's
I
not gonna
know,
happen.
I know. It's
No
like
way that's gonna
I
happen.
don't. Yeah. I
You
just
read like a speed demon epic. I'm trying to catch up to you with this chunker. And you read
Dragon Bone
you're like,
Chair.
I'm
That's
almost
right.
halfway
Epic did do
done.
that one.
yeah. Like I'm on chapter 25 now. Like
Ah, I
I'll
need to catch
probably
up.
finish it today. Yeah.
All
But
right.
yeah.
Well, if you guys want some dark stuff, please go read China Mieville. This guy is becoming one of my favorite authors. I'm reading The Scar right now, and I can't put it down.
I
This
just
man's
got the Broken
fantastic.
Binding special edition of Perdido Street Station. And
I
it's
want to reread
lovely.
it again. Mhm.
Yeah.
It is very good, folks. If you were in the chat, Chadia, Dom, Joanna, Tori, Usman, and everybody who joined me, I appreciate it. Britton, there were a few people I'm forgetting. Epic,
Colin.
thank you. Alicia, thank you.
Jared.
Colin was here, thank you. Jared was here, thank you. Matt, thank you. Evie, thank you for suggesting one of the best books I have ever read. I really appreciate it. And I hope we do this again for his next book. As a matter of fact, I'm planning Evie to get a review copy, I'm hoping, at some point when he drops his next book. So hopefully we can do this again, maybe even
Don't
for
hold your
Banished
breath.
Birds. Yeah, we won't. But whenever Simon wants to put out that next book, I'll be in line to go get it for sure. All right,
Mhm.
guys. Thank you so much, everybody out there in the chat and the live. It was good
Bye.
to see you again. Peace.
See ya.